A Belgian pilot flies solo over Nazi-occupied Brussels. He lands in the middle of an enemy city. He sips a cup of coffee while the Germans search for him. His true story is more incredible than any movie. It was January 20th, 1943. The Nazis had occupied Belgium for almost 3 years. The streets of Brussels were filled with German soldiers, tanks, and swastika flags. The Belgians lived in constant terror. But that day, something extraordinary was about to happen. A 23-year-old young man was about to do something no pilot had ever attempted before during the entire war. His name was Jean de Selys Longchamps. Jean was no ordinary military pilot. He came from an aristocratic Belgian family with castles and lands that had been in his family for centuries. When the Germans invaded Belgium, Jean could have easily fled to America or England. Instead of escaping, Jean joined the British Royal Air Force. For 2 years, he flew dangerous missions over enemy territory. But he always had one obsession: returning to his native Brussels to confront his country's occupiers. That January morning, Jean took off from a secret base in England. Officially, he was on a reconnaissance mission over France. But Jean had other plans that no one in the RAF knew about. He flew his Hawker Typhoon across the English Channel, dodging German patrols and aerial minefields. His destination wasn't France. It was Brussels, the city where he'd grown up, now completely controlled by the Nazis. Jean knew every street, every building, every park in Brussels. He had played in those gardens as a child. He had studied in those schools. He had dined in those restaurants. Seeing his city occupied by Nazi flags caused him an indescribable rage. His plan was risky to the point of insanity. He was to fly solo over the occupied capital, in broad daylight, with a clearly identifiable British plane. The chances of survival were practically zero. His plan was risky to the point of insanity. He was to fly solo over the occupied capital, in broad daylight, with a clearly identifiable British plane. The chances of survival were practically zero. When Jean appeared over Brussels, the Germans couldn't believe what they were seeing. A British fighter was flying low over their headquarters. The anti-aircraft guns immediately began firing, filling the sky with explosions. Jean flew straight to his first target, the Gestapo, headquarters at the Astoria Hotel. This luxurious hotel had been converted into a torture and interrogation center for the Belgian resistance. Dozens of patriots died there every week. With perfect precision, Jean machine-gunned the hotel windows. The Gestapo officers threw themselves to the ground, terrified. Some jumped out of the windows to escape. Jean had achieved the unthinkable, terrorizing the terrorists. But Jean wasn't finished. His next target was even more symbolic: the Royal Palace in Brussels, where the Germans had planted their Nazi flag instead of the Belgian one. Jean flew so low over the palace that his plane's wings almost touched the trees. The German soldiers fired with everything they had, but Jean dodged every bullet with perfect acrobatic maneuvers. With his machine gun, Jean destroyed the Nazi flag flying over their royal palace. Pieces of the swastika fell to the ground like confetti. The Belgian citizens watching from their windows couldn't believe their eyes. After humiliating the Germans in their own barracks, Jean did something no one expected. Instead of fleeing immediately, he landed his plane on Avenue Louise, one of Brussels' main streets. Belgian pedestrians froze as they watched a British fighter plane land in the middle of their occupied city. Jean stepped out of his cockpit, took off his helmet, and walked calmly toward a nearby cafe. What happened next was surreal. Jean sat on the cafe terrace, ordered an espresso, and read the newspaper as if it were a normal day. The Belgian citizens who recognized him said nothing to the Germans. For 20 minutes, Jean sipped his coffee while German soldiers ran through the city searching for the pilot who had attacked their facilities. They had him 100 meters away, but they didn't recognize him without his flight uniform. An elderly Belgian woman approached discreetly and gave him flowers. A child asked for his autograph. A priest silently blessed him. In those minutes, Jean became a living symbol of Belgian resistance. Finally, Jean returned to his plane, started the engine, and took off from the same avenue. The Germans arrived, just as he disappeared over the horizon. They had been completely humiliated. News of the attack spread through Brussels within hours. Belgians told the story in whispers, with admiration and pride. For the first time in 3 years, someone had openly defied the Nazi occupiers in their own capital. The Germans placed a huge reward for Jean's capture. They brought in Gestapo investigators from Berlin. They questioned hundreds of witnesses. But Jean was already back in England, planning her next mission. Jean's story inspired the Belgian resistance like never before. His attack proved that the Germans were not invincible, that a single man of courage could humiliate an entire occupying army. Jean's story inspired the Belgian resistance like never before. His attack proved that the Germans were not invincible, that a single man of courage could humiliate an entire occupying army. Over the next few months, Jean repeated similar attacks several times, each time more audacious, each time more risky. He became the personal nightmare of the German commanders in Belgium. On August 16, 1943, Jean took off on his final mission over Brussels. This time, the Germans were waiting for him. 4 Messerschmitt fighters intercepted him over the city he loved so much. The dogfight lasted only a few minutes. Jean fought valiantly, but it was just one plane against 4 German aces. His Typhoon was hit and began to fall in flames over the Brussels suburbs. Jean de Selys Longchamps died at the age of 23, crashing in the city where he was born. The Germans found his body in the wreckage of his plane. He had died as he had lived, defying the occupiers of his homeland. But Jean's death didn't halt his legacy. His example inspired hundreds of young Belgians to join the resistance. His attacks had proven that the Germans could be defeated. His courage became legendary. After the war, investigators discovered something incredible about Jean's missions. His attacks hadn't been impulsive acts of personal revenge. They had been carefully planned psychological warfare operations. Each target Jean attacked had a specific symbolic meaning. The Astoria Hotel represented Nazi repression. The Royal Palace represented occupied Belgian sovereignty. His attacks were coded political messages. Jean had studied psychological warfare in the RAF. He knew that publicly humiliating the occupiers was as important as any military victory. His missions were designed to restore hope to his people. German records captured after the war showed the real impact of Jean's actions. German commanders in Belgium reported a dramatic drop in their troops' morale after each attack. The German soldiers in Brussels lived in terror, expecting Jean to appear at any moment. The Nazi authorities had to allocate enormous resources just to defend themselves against a single Belgian pilot. Jean de Selys Longchamps had achieved something that entire armies had failed to do: transform the occupiers into the occupied. The Germans who controlled Belgium felt insecure in their own administrative capital. His true story is more extraordinary than any fiction. A young aristocrat who gave up safety to fight for his country. A pilot who preferred to die free than live under occupation. A hero who proved that individual courage can change history. Today, in Brussels, there is a plaque commemorating Jean's attacks. But his true monument is the freedoms we enjoy. Freedoms that men like him paid for with their lives. Jean de Selys Longchamps flew solo against the Nazis because he believed that some values are more important than life itself. His example reminds us that freedom always comes at a price, and that there are always heroes willing to pay it. If you enjoyed this heroic story, please like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next video.